Chicago Politics, live post-election analysis, is made possible by the generous financial support of Field Foundation of Illinois and generous Chicagoans like you.
Good evening, Chicago, and welcome to the live post-election special edition of Chicago Politics. I'm Hugo Balta, host of Chicago Politics.
I'm Andy Zopp, host of Chicago Newsroom 2.0. Let's begin with the hour with an update on the current state of affairs since the polls closed just 24 hours ago. With the help of 54% of Latino men and 52% of white women, Donald Trump has been elected the 47th President of the United States. Once again, black women voted en masse, 92% to be exact, for the president-elect's opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris.
While incomplete, election results to date suggest that Republicans will win the U.S. Senate majority, shifting the balance of power in Washington, D.C., and putting the chamber in a position to further boost the president-elect's agenda over the next 2 years of his presidency. With several races to be declared, the GOP flipped seats in West Virginia, Ohio, and Montana to win 52 seats in the chamber. Meanwhile, control of the House of Representatives remains uncertain, as more than 40 races have yet to be decided. Before the election, Republicans held a 220 to 212 edge. Control of the House may not be known for several days, though, as California has often taken days to count ballots, and recounts and runoffs of close races can take weeks to resolve.
In Chicago's historic first school board elections, unofficial results indicate that 4 candidates backed by the teachers union, 3 pro-school choice candidates, and 3 independent candidates were either winning or leading in their races. The election covered 10 seats across 10 districts in the city. The victorious candidates will join 11 additional members appointed by Mayor Brandon Johnson.
In District 1, CTU-backed Jennifer Custer, a former teacher and CPS parent, squeaks out a victory against Michelle and Pierre on Chicago's Northwest Side, securing 51% of the vote. In District 2, unofficial results have Ebony DeBerry, a former teacher and the CTU-backed candidate, winning a 4-way race to represent the city's far north lakefront, earning 42% of the vote. In District 3, with 56% of the vote, Carlos Rivas Jr. edged a victory over Jason Dones in the predominantly Latino district. 85% of residents are of Latino heritage. Rivas was backed by the charter school's proponent INCS Action PAC. District 4, Ellen Rosenfeld, a former CPS teacher, won a competitive race with 42% of the vote to represent neighborhoods along Chicago's North Lakefront. Rosenfeld was backed by both the Urban Center Action and Illinois Policy PAC, which supported local pro-small business candidates. Uncontested Aaron Jitu Brown will represent District 5, which spans from the West Loop to Austin. Brown was endorsed by the Chicago Teachers Union and ran unopposed after Michelia Blaze withdrew from the race in September. Ms. Blaze is currently sits on the board, having been appointed by Mayor Johnson after the mass resignation of the previous board last month.
Heading over to District 6, former CPS principal and independent candidate Jessica Biggs secured a win with 45% of the vote to represent neighborhoods on the city's south side, such as Inglewood, Greater Grand Crossing, Woodlawn, and Hyde Park, and neighborhoods on the city's north side, including Streeterville and River North. In District 7, Chicago Teachers Union-backed Yesenia Lopez won 56% of the vote in a 3-way contest to represent parts of the city's south and southwest sides. In District 8, Angel Gutierrez, a nonprofit consultant, beat his opponent Felix Ponce, a CPS music teacher and CTU-backed candidate, securing 64% of the vote. In District 9, which included the Mount Greenwood and Beverly Morgan Park neighborhoods, retired teacher and school psychologist and independent candidate Therese Boyle earned 38% of the vote to secure a seat, winning a 4-way race. And in District 10, Rapper Che Rhymefest Smith beat out 3 opponents, securing 32% of the vote.
Surprising few, Democratic nominee Eileen O'Neill Burke prevailed in the contest for state attorney over Republican nominee and perennial candidate Bob Fioretti. The former Cook County Circuit Court and appellate court judge garnered 66% of votes to replace Kim Fox as the county's top prosecutor.
Our live coverage continues on the other side of the break.
Up next, Andy will be joined at the Roundtable by the president of Onyx Strategic Partners, Claude Robinson, co-founder of Just Act Partners, Watis Gathings, host of Munson Tonight, Ashley Munson, and the Chief Civic Engagement Officer at the Cook County Assessor's Office, Kelvin Harris.
We're just getting started. Stay with us.
I'm Francia Garcia Hernandez, host of the program Presente. Local groups are rediscovering ancestral and indigenous practices in Chicago. Can these important traditions be a part of modern healthcare? Find out on the next episode of Presente. Join us on November 7 at 7 p.m. via Channel 19, streaming on cantv.org and the CanTV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
Paseo Boricua, marked by 2 huge metal Puerto Rican flags arching over a section of Division Street, are a proud historical and ongoing imprint of Puerto Rican identity here in Humboldt Park. I'm Hugo Balta. On the next episode of Sazón de Illinois, we'll sample the stories, culture, and cuisine of a family-owned business that has given this neighborhood its flavor for nearly 4 decades.
On the next episode of Behind the Confident Smile, I sit down with 2 incredible sisters, Lakira and Cadence, as we explore their unique experiences growing up alongside a sibling with special needs. Join us for an intimate and powerful conversation on cable channel 19, stream live at cantv.org, or catch it on the CanTV Plus app. Experience the power of community television with Behind the Confident Smile.
I'm Ricky Watson, inviting you to join me for the next critical conversation, where we focus on the importance of mental health, making sense of your purpose, and doing the impossible. Tune in for our opportunity to be inspired, enlightened, and encouraged. Join the conversation on CanTV Cable Channel 19, or stream live on cantv.org or on the CanTV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
CanTV is the lens through which Chicago's stories are told, harnessing the unifying power of community television. With CanTV On Demand, immerse yourself in the richness of our city through exclusive stories and programs tailored just for you, connecting you to the heartbeats of our streets, the voices of our people, and the spirit that makes Chicago unique. Discover the strength of your community on CanTV On Demand.
"24 hours ago, the country cast their votes for the 47th president of these United States of America. Chicagoans also weighed in on the first ever elected Chicago Public School Board. Joining me to help discuss and digest the results, the president of Onyx Strategic Partners, Claude Robinson, the co-founder of Just Act Partners, Watis Gathings, the host of the wildly popular CanTV original program Munson Tonight, Ashley Munson, Chief Civic Engagement Officer of the Cook County Assessor's Office, Kelvin Harris, and the founding CEO of Powerful Penny, Cheryl Grace. Claude, Justine, Ashley, Kelwin, and Cheryl. Welcome to the Roundtable. And as we have here on this historic election, so let's just start with, who wants to go first on giving me your headline on the election results? Ashley, I'll start with you.
You know, I think my first immediate thought was, I know you lying to me. Looking at the results as they came in, right, I think folks across the country knew that this was going to be a close race, but looking at the results, it was a blowout, right? And then if you look at some of these margins that President Joe Biden won with the last election, Kamala did poorly, underperformed in those areas.
She underperformed Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Right, and she lost the popular vote. That was shocking. Claude?
So as I stayed up till about 1:45 last night, I wanted to hold on hope that Vice President Harris would prevail, but once Pennsylvania hit, I was like, that's it. And then as I was going to bed, just thought of a longer historical context to know, the founding fathers, their aspect of democracy, where they want white men in charge and in control. This system's still working. So it's kind of my perspective that I'm keeping as I kind of deal with some of the disappointment.
Yeah. Kelwin, how about you? I mean,
I'm like Claude. I stayed up really late too, till about 2 o'clock in the morning. So shocked like everyone else. I think for me, it was, almost like, we have not gotten a grip on the MAGA movement overall. I think that the Harris campaign, I think us as individuals, I think we're in our own bubble, in our own feedback loop. And we don't understand that there's a large swath that's a heart of America that don't think like we think. Right. And we have our own perspectives. I think they look at Trump like he's God in many ways. I mean, some of them, particularly the religious right, think of him as like a King David almost. He's got his flaws. Sure, he's got his flaws, but he's the chosen one to them. He's almost like the anointed one, and it's hard to mess with someone or come against someone with that kind of Teflon following. Yeah. So I'll start there.
Do you think, Cheryl? You think there's anything that Vice President Harris didn't do? I'm hearing some things on the news earlier. People are immediately like, well, she didn't do this and she didn't do that. What do you think?
I think she did all the things. I don't think that there was anything that she could have done better per se, but I think the headline for me, and I went to bed early last night. I didn't want to watch it, and I didn't want to take that anxiety to bed with me. But for me, I think the headline was all 5 stages of grief hit America in a day. Denial, we've heard that here, anger, bargaining, right? And also depression. I heard a lot of my clients were depressed today. And then acceptance. So some people just came out of the bat and accepted it. So I think that's what America is grappling with. We're grieving. Some of us are, others are joyful. But I think that was the takeaway, was grief. And you have to allow yourself time to process grief.
Yeah, no question. Well, Atis, there's we talked about it was a big margin, popular vote. The blue wall did not hold. What do you and Kelwin suggesting that we just don't get Trump's appeal, and I heard that actually from Claire McCaskill commenting. She said Democrats just don't understand his constituency. What do you think? I mean, I know I don't understand them, but.
I don't understand them, and sometimes I often ask myself if I'm the one that's disillusioned a little bit, but the reality of it is, over 70 million people voted for him. And so I think that we have to just stop and face the fact and the reality. I mean, I learned this as a little girl growing up. When people show you who you are, believe them. And I think that this is the story of America. Here you have a woman overly qualified like Vice President Harris, who spent a lot of times, did it in less time. I mean, we talk about 100 days, what she was able to accomplish and rally people and get people excited with just a glimmer of hope, even if it was just a few months. She did it backwards in the hills, as some would say, but it still wasn't good enough. And so I think we'll watch some media cycles of talking about what she could have done or not done, or what was the breakdown in the campaign. But the reality of it is, this is who America has continuously shown us that we are as a collective, and there's something that needs to be done in order to break down and truly get to the root of what's driving this type of behavior.
Right. I think really important. I mean, clearly he's, former President Trump is speaking to a subset of the population. I think one of the other things that was shocking or surprising to me was how well he did in the Latino community, particularly with Latino men. But in general, he didn't do terrible with Latino women. Ashley, what do you think is why he's resonating with the Latino community?
Yeah, that's a good question. To Kelvin's point earlier, I do think people think he's the Messiah, but I also think people put character and all the things that he says low on the totem pole, right? When you are facing inflation and you're concerned about immigration, and surprisingly, Latinos are super concerned about immigration. I saw a few articles that were talking to people that said, hey, I want them to do it the right way because my family did it the right way. And so it's immigration, it's inflation, and so I think he's resonating with a group of people, just like Bernie Sanders did on the other side, a group of people that are frustrated with government. It's just we didn't learn from Bernie Sanders. Instead, we pushed him far to the left and kept on with Hillary Clinton. Instead of learning from Bernie, taking the real issues and moving that and pivoting to where we can address real issues or the bread and butter topics that Latinos and other folks care about.
Right. I think the other thing, you touched on something, which is that, for many of us, former President Trump has some significant character flaws, right?
Oh, for sure.
He's going to be the first ever convicted felon to step into the White House. He is unkind. He's immoral. Then just does facts, and people just kind of go, well, that's not. Is that you think, Claude, that's because people assume all people have such a low perception of all politicians? They're like, well, he's just another politician. That stuff doesn't bother me.
Right. No, I don't think so at all. He's a white man, and he's protected by a society and a structure that wants them to succeed. And I believe, though, a lot of who he's talking to, his misogynism and his sexism, it appeals to a lot of men who are insecure and don't want a woman in power. And they may bring up inflation, they may bring up the economy and immigration and things like that, but they'll never admit their frailties and their fears and insecurities that a woman would be in power and leading the country. So I believe there's a real fear and a lot of ignorance by a lot of the Latino men and that voted for him. And then, black men, there was only a 1% increase for President Trump, but still there were a lot of black men
20%
who were being kind of co-opted to follow along and then excuse a lot of these just ridiculous, childish behaviors by, I call him a clown. This clown.
I think Claude touched on something, Cheryl, on the question of do you think that Vice President Harris' gender and race had a role to play in this loss?
Absolutely. I think it was the gender, and that's why I said she didn't do anything wrong. She is who she is. She's a black, Asian, Indian woman. And I don't think America is ready yet for a female president. And I do believe that the fear that was tapped into resonated, and that Latinos voted even against some of their own best interests because of that fear. But they grabbed hold of someone who was talking about change and talking about it loudly, even without any details. So even with what was the phrase that he used? I have a semblance of a plan.
Concept
of a plan.
Right.
So I think that's what happened was people tapped into the image that there's a strong, powerful, boisterous Teflon man, as you said, that can lead us through this change.
Yeah. So, I'm going to move to the Chicago races in a minute. But one last question here: how do we move forward? I mean, we're really split, very divisive in this country, and whether people choose to pay attention to what he says or not. Former President Trump was very, very and his running mate, who accused people, Haitians, of eating cats and dogs, and they were very unkind and unpleasant. So how do we? And now they're talking about bringing people together. Like, how is that going to happen, Calvin? Do we think we have a chance at bridging some divides here, or do you think really
I'm
the Republican Party doesn't care much?
I'm a Pollyanna, so there's always hope. But like Watis was saying, it's almost like the Maya Angelou quote: when people tell you who they are, believe them. And we have not believed the Republican Party. We have not believed Trump. We've sort of seen the bravado. Back to what you were saying about Latinos, and Claude was saying African Americans as well. We've gravitated to those insecurities. We've gravitated towards the image that we want to project. He's a reality TV show star, and knows how to push those kinds of buttons. But we haven't really believed what he says, and what he says is the truth. He can repeal some of these things that have been significant progress for us. So we have to listen to the heart of the country and gauge that perspective. I think for the Democrats, we started to roll out Beyonce, and we started to roll out, Usher on the campaign trail, and all these celebrities. That really isolates us in a lot of ways, and I think that had negative externalities for the Democratic Party. But really to just get in touch, and that's going to be a slow, long game, a lot of introspection, but I believe we can do it.
Yeah. Great point about the celebrity push. So let's move for a little bit of our remaining time to the Chicago Board of Election races, right? Huge, big deal, right? Haven't had an elected school board here in a very, very long time. And it looked like Chicago Teachers Union had put a lot of money, had candidates in every race, in 10 races, and it looks like they're going to get 3 or 4 of those. What do we think? Is that a statement about the mayor, Ashley, or about CTU, or just democracy at work?
No, I think it shows that folks are not willing to go with the status quo. Right, and I think all the contention that has been happening at a city level, I think is coming to a head. And I think Mayor Johnson has to look forward to the next election and how hard that's going to be and who are going to be his allies. And I think this shows that it's going to be an uphill battle. And I think folks I think folks were opposed before, but I think now it's a lot of people talking, and it's pushing towards what the next election will look like.
Watis?
I couldn't agree more. I think that this is one of those things where across many races we saw people just being clear that they want everything but what we have currently. And I think that it's very clear that we saw that in the presidential race, and I think it's translated to some of the local races as well. I think that anyone who is willing to serve in that capacity to advocate for our kids as we try to create a better school system is to be commended. But I think it's clear that community doesn't feel like it's healthy for CTU to have as much power over the future of our systems and what's been happening. And so I'm happy to see that there is a balance of individuals who will be elected, but I think there's still an uphill battle to figure out a lot of things that's happening within Chicago Public Schools right now.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sharon.
No, I was going to say that's exactly right. I think what Chicagoans showed was that they want a balance. And they did that by making sure that you have some of the CTU representatives that were elected. But they also want additional voices. They want ideas, and they don't want to be shut down. So you're exactly right. It is a way of saying, I'm here, I matter, and we're not going to be told what we are going to do going forward. And I think that's the message that the mayor needs to kind of take on hand, is not that it was wrong, it was simply that people want a say-so, and they want those diverse voices heard.
I mean, do you think, I think there's some, and I heard today one commentator note that this is a real testament to local democracy at work,
Yes.
right? That the neighborhoods and the candidates were in the districts, and people looked at the candidates and made very rational decisions about that. I mean, is that? Do you agree with that, Colin?
Absolutely, and I think look, the mayor will be fine this go round. He still has 11 seats that he has the ability to fill. More concerned about 2026 when the public gets a chance to elect the entire school board. Yeah, I mean it's somewhat of a referendum. People are concerned. They've seen the drama with Pedro Martinez. They've seen the school board step down, the back and forth and resignation of the last president that was nominated of the school board. So people want change. I think the thing that stuck out to me though was that not a lot of people even voted for the school board. They voted, but it was the last thing on the ballot. Last thing on the ballot.
It was after all that long list of judges, right?
After all the people were worn out. All right.
Exactly, they were tired.
So maybe they could.
It was a particularly long list this year. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time for this fascinating discussion. Thank you. A very important election, and there certainly will be more discussion to come.
Yes.
Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
On the other side of the break, Hugo sits front and center with members of the VUCA Collective to discuss how to transform challenges into opportunities for growth and action. Chicago Politics Live Special Report Election 2024 continues after the break.
I'm Sean Cattouse. Welcome to The Compassionate Competitor. Each episode will explore the mental, physical, and emotional toll, as well as the rewards that come along with high-performance athletics. Join the conversation on CAN TV Cable Channel 19, stream live on cantv.org, or on the new CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
I'm Darius Hillman. On the next edition of Chicago Noir, I'll introduce you to 3 incredible leaders working to positively impact outcomes for Chicago's most at-risk communities. Join the conversation on CAN TV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
In tonight's second Front and Center segment, I'm joined by Chris Powell and Tanya Cruz-Teller, members of the VUCA Collective, to discuss the challenges and opportunities that arise post-election for leaders, individuals, and communities. Thank you both very much for joining us tonight. How are you both feeling? I know a lot of, we've had a lot of conversations day after the election. How are you?
My hope muscle is a little fatigued.
I'm sure.
A little numb.
Yeah. A lot of familiar sentiment that we're all feeling, but I think the work that you're leading with VUCA is really going to help us as we continue to forge ahead, and I'm really excited to have this opportunity to talk to you. Let's start with you, Chris. What is the VUCA Collective's mission and how it supports leaders, individuals, organizations, and communities in transforming challenges into opportunities for growth and action?
Well, Hugo, thank you for having us. First, the VUCA Collective is really, actually, I'll tell you what the name is. Actually, it's about, VUCA is a South African language, word, means illuminate, to arise. And so we're a collective who works here locally and globally around the world, helping teams move from just surviving to thriving. And we work with both communities and organizations, individuals and leaders, really focused on when there is a time and a need for change in the type of leadership we have. That's when we're called in to work with those teams to help serve as guides and supports to them as they make those transitions.
Not just surviving, but thriving and illuminating, something that we absolutely need in these times. Let's move over to you, Tanya. Tell us about the appreciative inquiry and how does that activate collective empowerment to help individuals?
Absolutely. So appreciative inquiry was discovered actually at the Cleveland Clinic when they were looking at how to build a positive culture with staff. And what they identified is that people move in the direction of what they focus on. So if an organization is looking at their challenges, that's the direction they're going to move in. So for example, in this post-election moment, we can be asking the questions of why did we lose? Or what went wrong here? But instead, as appreciative inquiry practitioners, what we want to focus on is a generative question that brings us into hope and resilience, such as what did we learn from this moment that can help us move forward? And what are some of the small or big actions that can bring us together as a community to feel more resourceful and to be able to move forward with some new solutions and some new leadership?
And that's so important, right? Creating an environment that is productive and positive, because so often we're facing negatives, right? We're trying to put out fires, but if we change that that rhetoric, it really changes the mindset. Chris, I wanted to ask you about, in this post-election, what are some of the key challenges facing leaders and individuals?
Well, I think it's the same if you're an individual or a leader, but you're on different ends of the spectrum. It's the major four, what I call it. Economic, health, education, and safety, which are common across. I think we all want the best, regardless of how you voted. We all want that. But how we solve for those opportunities and challenges is where appreciative inquiry comes in, and the work we do with communities and teams to help them move through those challenges. Because before the election, those were the big four, and after the election, those are still the big four.
Yeah, and what you've mentioned are the social determinants of health, right?
Yes.
Which we know when we're talking about marginalized communities, Latinos, the African American communities, and others, there are certain disparities. But another thing that you said is really key, and that is finding solutions, right? It's not just about highlighting the problems, but working together and taking the steps in solving them. And often, more often than not, the communities themselves are already lifting themselves up, and they have the keys to solving those problems. Now, both of you are presenting at the International Leadership Association Conference next week in Chicago. I want to hear about this. Tell us about Tanya, please talk to us about the event.
Fantastic. We're really excited, and it's an incredibly timely event, especially given what's happening not only locally here, but in the world. It's the largest gathering of academics and students and practitioners who really are focused on leadership and what is the new leadership practices that we need today. So for example, we're going to be speaking about inclusive leadership. So how do we take teams that have diverse views and perspectives and come together to move from challenging conflict to healthy conflict, to identifying positive deviance within their teams and their communities, to come up with different solutions in this time, which is what we need.
You've mentioned three words, not in no particular order: diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Yeah. Three key ingredients in moving forward as community. And of course, we've unfortunately seen in the last couple of years that they've become these trigger words, right? These key words that have a negative connotation. But we know, especially in those times, we've got to double down on DE&I. Chris, I want to go back to you. How can viewers learn more about VUCA Collective?
Well, for now, they can reach out to me directly. Catch me on email. I know that's old school for a lot of folks, but powell@talmetrics.com. You can find me there, and you can also find me on LinkedIn and on Instagram.
Wow, email is old school?
I'm in trouble. I know, it is.
I'm in trouble with emails old school.
Yeah, and also there's an opportunity post the ILA conference. So just this Sunday, we're going to be gathering over a meal. It's called a sobremesa, in order to really discuss and talk about leadership and what's possible and tell our stories in this time. So people are welcome to reach out to Chris and to come find us on Sunday.
Telling our stories are so important, right? It adds authenticity that draws from lived experiences and also professional experiences. So another, the words that you guys are sharing are definitely resonating with me. I've got one more question. I'd like a real life example, application of working with leaders on systemic change.
Great. So I'd love to share that so an example of working with 7 different government agencies. They had about $7 million annually to address HIV and AIDS epidemic control. And because they came from different perspective of, well, are we doing social determinants, or are we giving out condoms, or are we addressing this kind of change? They were really in unhealthy conflict. And so we worked with them to rewire their leadership mindset to see, oh, I'm in fight or flight mode, but actually, if I can reduce that autonomic response, if I can listen to stories, if I can be seen and heard, if I can go and visit the community so I remember what the impact is that we're all coming together around, they were able to shift from the conflict to collaboration as a leadership, as a very diverse leadership team.
Yeah, and collaboration is key to success, right? Yes. I think we live in a society, a capitalist society, that conditions us to kind of race up that ladder singularly and almost not caring and causing a lot of damage, but collaboration builds these strong foundations for long-term systemic growth. Chris, any other thoughts in regards to applying, these applications and working with leaders?
Well, Hugo, I think Tanya gave a really great example, and it's stories, and the stories illuminate the data, and there's so much, I call it data exhaust. There's enough data, but listening and having those inclusive voices, even CAN TV's motto, voices matter, having those voices through stories helps illuminate so that we can get to that collaboration. Because I think what we see in this current election is that folks didn't feel like their voices were being heard enough by one party or the other party. And so regardless of how people voted, how do we hold our leaders more accountable to listen and take action on our voices and not just theirs or big business or big funders?
And that's really key. Like both major parties overemphasize tried and true voters that in our country are white seniors and not enough on the next electorate, beginning with Latinos that are a younger demographic, but also the Black community and other marginalized communities. Chris, Tanya, it's been a pleasure to spend this time with you. I definitely would like to see you very soon to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. On the other side of the break, Andy returns with psychologist Dr. Candice Norcott and Dr. Ninenka Anyezia, who will discuss the emotional toll many people are carrying after one of the most divisive election seasons in recent memory. Stay with us.
I'm Francia Garcia Hernandez, host of the program Presente. Local groups are rediscovering ancestral and indigenous practices in Chicago. Can these important traditions be a part of modern healthcare? Find out on the next episode of Presente. Join us on November 7 at 7 p.m. via Channel 19, streaming on cantv.org and the CanTV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
Joining me at the Roundtable to discuss the emotional toll of what has been one of the most intense and divisive election cycles in our history are Dr. Candice Norcott, Associate Professor at the University of Chicago, and licensed psychologist Dr. Ninenka Anyezia. Nice to see you both again. Yes. Thank you for coming back.
Thanks for having us.
I have to say, it has been a roller coaster of a cycle. We had a candidate, and that candidate dropped out, and then we had a new candidate, and we're all excited. And I have to say, even myself have been really stressful. And even on the Republican side, their candidate had was a couple of assassination attempts. So how do we go about unpacking and processing, particularly these last 24, 48 hours have been particularly intense? Dr. Norcott, I'll start with you.
Well, one place that I've started is not assuming that everybody feels the same.
Yeah.
And that when you're talking to somebody about the impact of the outcome, that they're going to feel the same way. So I think that's been pretty helpful, because it's going to range from joy and happiness to fear and sadness and grief.
Right.
And so part of it is kind of sitting back and seeing, from my clinical professional lens, like in my clinic work, just kind of hearing where people are and not making assumptions.
Right.
Because it's going to be a range.
Right. That's a great point. I'm going to come back to that for a second. Ninenka, how about you?
Yeah, I think that the range of emotions is definitely important. I think that one of the things that's also important is to give yourself permission to feel a range of emotions. Some people are feeling rage, and some people are feeling apathy. And it's really important to understand that all of those feelings are valid, that you can really validate yourself and saying, like, what, it's okay that I feel this way. But then to also remember that it's temporary, your feelings are going to change over time, and none of those feelings mean that you have to act or do something right now. That it's important to give yourself time to experience those feelings, to figure out what would be your plan of action moving forward, and not feel like you have to do something knee-jerk right away.
Right. Oh, great point. I want to circle back to you because I think the point you raised about not everybody feels the same. You know, some people, more than 50% of us are kind of happy. So when you do have that, and for the people who are kind of really depressed about it, it's a challenge. So how do we, on both sides, recognize and accept what are some skills we can have to not, kind of just reject somebody else's who's feeling so differently, because that can create its own tension, right?
Well, one of the, I think, things that have gotten us to where we are is loneliness and separation and division. And part of how we're going to recover is going to be connection, understanding, and our shared humanity. And so I think creating more other is not going to be helpful. And so it's going to be really tempting to say other, them, and see people as dehumanized. But I think after, after we kind of crawl out and start to digest what happened, to really watch our thoughts around, are we othering as we're taking care of ourselves? Does that mean that we're isolating, or does that mean that we're taking care of ourselves, but also understanding that we're still part of a community, a national community, a global community? So it's complicated and it's not easy, but I do think that it's through connection that we're going to be able to kind of come back and see this like shared humanity thing. It's very pie in the sky, but it's what I'm holding on to right now.
Yeah, I think in a perfect universe, it's what you want. I think the challenge is, and I've heard this, from several people today, I think a lot of the people who were supporters of Vice President Harris just don't get it, right? They just, it's not just other, it's just like, I just don't get where you're coming from. And even when you talk about it, I still don't get it. And so how do is there a pathway to find a place there to, forgive, get comfortable with, accept a perspective that you just simply don't understand?
Well, I mean, that's tough, and it's not fast work. It's not quick work. It's something that does take a long time. And it does take having curiosity and moving from trying to debate and convince to moving to trying to understand. I think that's, you kind of mentioned, like, you just don't get it. I think that when people start to think about it, like, okay, well, why do you have those views? How did your life experiences shape those views? What kind of values do you have that we maybe share in common but express themselves in a different way for you because of your life? I think once we get to that point of curiosity, then people can have conversations about really difficult topics, because you're not going into it with the goal of, I want to make you see the same or feel the same way I do. It's more I want us to understand each other.
That's great. Many of us have children. My kids are adults, but they're young adults, and they were traumatized. And I had to talk to them last night. Talk to them again this morning. But also, I think anybody, teens and up paying attention, heard kind of the language and the discussion. How do we talk? Do you have some thoughts about how parents should think about talking to their children about this election and about how we move forward with a president who had been during the course of the election pretty negative about his opponent and other people. So how do we talk to them about, because he said things that generally we tell children not to, that adults shouldn't, and they shouldn't say.
Right.
There's a piece where, he is exposing so many people to so many children to things that we would want to hide or shelter them from early on in their years, and now they're getting exposed and having to reckon with. And so you can join them in talking about how to respond. So when somebody acts inappropriately, offends us, how do we respond? And so you can create like shared opportunities for learning about history, learning about collective activism, in an age-appropriate way, learning about how you come together to support the things that you feel passionately about. So it's about understanding the impact. Yes, this is hurtful. Yes, this has an impact, and how do we respond in a healthy way? I think that's a helpful discourse and a place to be with kids and with families.
So an opportunity to have an important conversation.
Yeah.
Nika, you
Yeah,
agree
I was
with
going
that?
to say, I was going to add on to what you're saying, that I think that one of the things we've seen in both of these election cycles where Trump was a president or was a candidate was that a lot of young people are repeating things they hear, they're repeating what they hear their parents say, they're repeating things that they heard on the news, and they don't necessarily have the background to even understand or form an opinion of their own. So I think part of those conversations that we have with teenagers and even younger children is, okay, but why don't you like Trump? Right? Maybe you've heard me or your father or aunt and uncle say negative things about Donald Trump, but let's really kind of think about what are the issues, what are the values that we hold, what are the things that really shape those opinions versus just focusing on the emotion, the negative emotional reaction to his name or his candidacy.
So I think it's also a great opportunity, to remind people that just because we disagree doesn't mean we have to demonize, right? I think that unfortunately it was a big factor in the campaign, but I think part of trying to get through this is trying to minimize that conversation. It's very easy. I fall into it myself, right? It is very easy to say, well, if you support that candidate, there must be something wrong with you. I can't get there. So, is that an important opportunity to look at ourselves, Candace? You think?
Today, today.
Maybe not today.
Yeah, right.
Maybe not today.
Right. So today, take care of yourself. Right. Today, just try to hug your loved ones. I think the point about not making any big decisions, nothing has to happen today other than you just acknowledge how hard this is. Right. And then you can reflect and say, how do I not look at people as evil, right? Because the person that voted for Trump is still in some cases, right? The person that voted for Trump, right, is still the person that is
family member,
right? Is family, is the person that is making your coffee and saying a hello to you, and we're not going to get through this and potentially maybe be healthier for it in some future world by having vitriol and hate for each other because of the way we voted.
Yeah. I yesterday, it was kind of over the course of the week because it was kind of as the election was coming, but yesterday in particular, I was wound so tight. And then last night, I was really physically did not feel well.
Yeah.
What are signs we should be looking for in ourselves, and that our anxiety is maybe we need to really start focusing and take a step back? Nika, what should be? Are there signals that people should say, hey, if you're here, you need to take a second and take a break?
Absolutely. I mean, I think so much of it does have to do with checking in with your body. Yeah. I think a lot of times we end up being programmed to ignore different signs, like, okay, I have aches and pains, or I'm tired all the time, or I can't sleep. We end up ignoring those, and we kind of sometimes feel like we have to just push through, right? Well, I have to do this thing, I have to keep going. I think that when you get to the point where you're constantly pushing through, you're constantly feeling like you're tired, you can't really move, you're starting to feel these different ailments, or like you're not eating, you're not sleeping, you're isolating yourself, you don't want to talk to anybody. All of these are signs that mean, hey, I need to check in with myself and make a change, possibly. Sometimes they're just signs that you're going through something tough. And so that point about today is really important, because those signs don't necessarily mean that something's clinically wrong. Hurry up, go see a psychologist right away, right? Sometimes those signs mean I need a nap, or I need to not skip lunch, or I need to, unplug from social media, right? So those physical signs I really think are the first, bit of evidence that you need to do something different.
Right. I think your point about self-care and just take a minute, because stress can be exhausting, right? And you don't even realize it until you just realize how exhausted you are. Do you think, what about, I found, I had different, people had different responses, right? Some people were watching every map and every change on the map every step of the way. Other people were turning it off. Do you think if for people for whom it's been a very particularly stressful, maybe it's time to turn off the maps, turn off maybe some of the social media feeds you're getting, and just take a little break, and including not just quiet time, but also just screen time?
Well, I think it's a common recommendation for psychologists to take a break from social media and to take a break from screens and activate different parts of your brain. You know, reading fiction, reading anything else other than the news, talking to people, interacting. Those things just light up different parts of your brain and get you engaged socially, which we know it just influences your well-being. And watching TV, watching your screen is a very singular activity. It's very, it doesn't feel isolating because it feels maybe like we're plugged in, but it is a very solo activity. So anything that gets you kind of engaged in other and like in community, I think is a positive shift for many people. And turning off the news feed, like absolutely. I just can't. I want to say again, take a break from the screen.
Yeah, you
absolutely. And I think that with a lot of teenagers, right? Like Candace said, this is a common recommendation, but a lot of times people don't really want to hear it because it's a habit, it's a pattern, it's what you're used to. I work with many teenagers who say, this is how I go to sleep at night, right? This is my routine. And so a lot of times the way that I get people to really look at it is to think about, well, how do you feel after? And I think that's really the key, right? To actually create this mindful experience of, okay, I've looked at screens, I've done the doom scrolling, right? That we all do at different times, right? How do I feel afterwards? Do I feel better? Do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel more connected? Or do I actually feel, okay, I just wasted 30 minutes? Or do you feel like, oh, I should have done this and this and this, but I just went into this mindless bubble? So I think that checking in with yourself at those points too is helpful.
Okay. All right, well, you guys have given great counsel. For people who are really feeling stressed and strained right now, are there resources? Where can they go right now? Do you have resources that they can turn to, a site or?
Yeah, so NAMI is a great resource, National Alliance of Mental Illness. Their website has resources for election stress and they have general hotlines. And so that would be, I think that's a very good hub to send people. There's always the 988 crisis line for people that need help in the moment, and that's a talker. And even the NAMI has like a chat function as well.
Okay, well, terrific. Well, you guys have been really terrific, and thank you so much. As always, the council has been great, and I think particularly today, really important. So thank you again, Candace and Nika, for being here with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
On the other side of the break, CAN-TV's Executive Director, Darius Hillman, will join us for the last word. Stay with us.
I'm Sean Cattouse. Welcome to The Compassionate Competitor. Each episode will explore the mental, physical, and emotional toll, as well as the rewards that come along with high-performance athletics. Join the conversation on CAN-TV Cable Channel 19, stream live on cantv.org, or on the new CAN-TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
I'm Darius Hillman. On the next edition of Chicago Noir, I'll introduce you to 3 incredible leaders working to positively impact outcomes for Chicago's most at-risk communities. Join the conversation on CAN-TV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN-TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
With the last word tonight, we're joined by CAN-TV's Executive Director, Darius Hillman. A quick disclaimer, the opinions expressed by Mr. Hillman are his own and do not necessarily represent the views of CAN-TV. Darius, the last word is yours.
God is good all the time. All the time, God is good. The past few months, the past few years, the past few decades has challenged the emotional well-being of the most well-adjusted among us. After falling to its knees in 2008, the country mustered up, in spite of itself, the collective courage to elect a highly qualified black man to fix what we'd collectively broken, then immediately slipped aggressively into buyer's remorse, led by a group of politicians who spent the day of said black man's inauguration shoring up a plan to ensure he wouldn't achieve a single success during his presidency.
a presidency they were bound and determined to limit to a single term. That black man, despite the mighty efforts of many, served 2 terms, saving the economy, championing marriage equality, and pushing through the Affordable Care Act. The very health care, the very same people who actively rooted for his failure now utilize to prolong their lives. While the efforts to break the president himself failed, they did open up a dark door leading to a barely closed Pandora's box that housed the ongoing remnants of America's original sin, the enslavement and degradation of melanin-charmed people, more specifically black people. So successful was the effort that even some melanin-charmed proudly took up the mantle to poo-poo everything that said black president was working to accomplish on their behalf. Fast forward to 2015, when what would become the greatest threat to our precious American democracy descended a golden escalator, preening like a peacock. And with the help of his smarter, yet equally dangerous conspirators, he expertly tapped into and fully exploited America's unprocessed trauma and divisions related to race and religion and gender. The dirty secrets many dared only whisper, the 34-time convicted felon gave them permission to say out loud with full vitriolic voice. Soon enough, the quiet part became a roar, the CAG party now a four-alarm fire, and the norms of civility and mutual respect replaced by grievance and a palpable animosity that threatens to tear America fully apart. Last night, America had a choice to make, and America chose chaos. Yes, God is good all the time, but choices indeed have consequences. So, say a prayer, then gird your loins and brace for impact.
CAN TV is the lens through which Chicago's stories are told, harnessing the unifying power of community television. With CAN TV on demand, immerse yourself in the richness of our city through exclusive stories and programs tailored just for you, connecting you to the heartbeats of our streets, the voices of our people, and the spirit that makes Chicago unique. Discover the strength of your community on CAN TV on demand.
Thank you, Darius, and thank you, Chicago and beyond, for joining us tonight for our special live 2024 election coverage.
We'll be back live next week with a postmortem on the election. Our guests will include Max Bever, Director of Public Information for the Chicago Board of Elections, and Juan Gonzalez, a Senior Research Fellow at Great Cities Institute. Both of them, all of them, will help us better understand what motivated voters to the polls and what happens next.
Until then, be well and well informed. Good night.